In an era when the three-point shot was relatively new and definitely not encouraged, Michael Adams made it a staple of his game, pulling up from anywhere and everywhere with a shooting form that didn't exactly scream marksman.
As he got one of the ugliest shots you ever, it's a standstill push shot, one-handed.
But he poured in three-pointers at historic rates and did just as much damage, slicing through defenses with his speed and change of direction. The Boston College standout, who was labeled as too small and out of control coming out of college, had to fight for any opportunity he could get. An opportunity that finally came when he ended up with the Denver Nuggets in the late 80s, putting up incredible scoring and assist numbers in their run-and-gun offense for years, until he was traded to Washington after the most prolific season of his career. Still a good point guard for the Bullets, his career slowed down in the following years, eventually calling it quits after 11 seasons. Never the most efficient player, but always the most exciting, Michael Adams was a dynamo who only knew how to play the game one way.
Michael Adams knows only one speed, and that's fast.
Let's jog your memory. Growing up in Hartford, Connecticut, Michael Adams was always the shortest player on the court, and it wasn't easy to get his shot off against taller defenders. So to make it easier, he developed his trademark push shot. By the time Adams got to Hartford Public High, there were some attempts to change his jumper, but when that didn't help, coaches left his shot alone from then on. Yet even after finishing as the state's leading scorer as a senior, the 5'10 guard who was too small and out of control could barely get attention from Division II schools, let alone Division I programs. But that changed after Adams earned MVP in an all-star tournament and would receive the last scholarship offer from Boston College, a scholarship which had just opened after BC struck out on a blue-chip big man, someone named Patrick Ewing. Boston College's strongest position was point guard, not because of Adams, but because of junior John Bagley. Yet fortunately for Adams, he would still see the court, as BC head coach Tom Davis was an equal opportunity kind of guy.
Even the manager on Boston College ties his shoes tightly. You never know when you're going in the ball game with Tom Davis.
The high-motor, high-scoring Adams took some time to learn and adjust to the Eagles' offense, but once he did, he was a fixture in nearly every game. His numbers were modest, but he impressively would average over a steal per game in his limited minutes. Boston College got out to a 5-6 start, but they turned their season around after that, losing just 2 of their final 15 to finish the regular season at 18-8. But after a close win over Syracuse in the conference tourney quarterfinals, they would lose a close one to Villanova in the semis. But they had done enough for a tournament bid, and after a round 1 defeat of San Francisco, Adams would announce himself in round 2, dropping 21 points off the bench to upset a top-ranked DePaul team, led by Terry Cummings, and ending their 21-game win streak, which would earn him a starting spot for the Sweet 16 versus Kansas State. And Adams kept it going, with 20 points in another win. Unfortunately, the Elite Eight would be the end of the road, as BC fell to Houston, and Adams ended his freshman year with averages of about 5.5 points, 1.5 assists, and 1 steal per game. Boston College looked a lot different going into the 83 season. Bagley was gone to the NBA, and Davis was gone to Stanford, with Gary Williams taking over as the Eagles head coach, and Adams taking over as the starting point guard. And Williams soon realized that Adams was the guy who could make things happen quickly, so he let Adams do what he did best: play fast. Adams pushed the pace and got out in transition, not only upping his scoring to over 16 points per game, but also acting as one of the top distributors in the Big East. And when it came to forcing turnovers, Adams was the best in the conference, averaging nearly 3 steals. So Adams, John Garris, and Jay Murphy were one of the highest scoring trios in the nation. And while BC's defense did give up a lot of points, their offense scored more points than any other team in Division I, becoming more dangerous as the season went on, and defeating ranked teams in Villanova and Georgetown, while also going 2-0 versus a Chris Mullin-led St. John's team, who were one of the best in the nation, finishing the regular season at 19-5 and earning the top seed in the Big East tourney, while making it all the way to the tournament final. Unfortunately, they couldn't make it a perfect 3-0 against St. John's, as Adams went 1 of 13 from the field, and the Eagles fell to the Redmen. But at 21-6, Boston College was making a return to the tournament. A low-scoring affair versus Princeton in the second round would see Adams finish with 7 points, but Boston College got the win, and now they had to get through Ralph Sampson and Virginia in the Sweet 16. Adams would finish with 18 points and 8 assists. But with Sampson in the middle, Adams had a hard time getting good looks, shooting below 32% for the game. And while it was close, Virginia would come out victorious. But Adams' improved sophomore year had ended with him averaging about 16 points, 5.5 assists, and 3 steals per game. With the graduation of John Garris, the Eagles lost their best scorer. And while they were still a high-powered offense, it wasn't at the same level as last year. Adams still played great, and was even more of a scorer this season, putting up a career-high average. Yet this led to his assist numbers dropping quite a bit. Nonetheless, he was still one of the most exciting guards in the nation, again leading the conference in steals, and even being recognized as a second-team All-Big East member. And Boston College looks set to be one of the top teams in the conference after a 9-3 start, capped off with a win over St. John's. But overall, conference play was not as kind to them as last year, winning just half of their Big East games and losing 4 of their final 6 games of the season. And that skid continued in the conference tourney, losing a heartbreaker to St. John's in the quarterfinals. And with just 15 wins on the year, there would be no NCAA tournament. They would get an NIT invite, but after a first-round win, Notre Dame ended their season in round 2, as Michael Adams finished the year averaging about 17.5 points, 3.5 assists, and 3 steals per game. Boston College rolled out a more balanced game plan in '85. It was both the lowest scoring offense and best defensive version of the team during Adams' 4 years. The main players on the roster had changed, with forward Roger McCready and guard Dominic Presley taking on much bigger roles. But Adams was still the leader, and while he was again the team's top scorer, his scoring had dropped and his assists had gone back up, in a partial attempt to appease his teammates.
Well, that was one time Michael Adams could have taken a shot. One of the knocks against him last year by his teammates was that he had a tendency to shoot too much. This year, he's made it a point to look for his teammates a little more.
And it's true Michael Adams forced some ill-advised shots, but good shot or not, he could make it.
The hoop is Michael Adams. Oh, he makes those all the time. It's unreal. How does he know where the hoop is?
And overall, Adams was one of the top scorers and distributors in the Big East, and like usual, led the conference in steals, resulting in another second-team All-Big East selection. And Boston College got off to a hot start, winning their first 10, before narrowly losing to a top-ranked Georgetown team, which would kick off a bit of a losing skid. And ultimately, the Eagles finished with a losing record in conference play for the first time in Adams' college career, then fell to Syracuse in the first round of the conference tourney. But a 16-win season, as a member of arguably the toughest conference in college basketball, would get them a return to the NCAA tournament. Round 1 would see them edge out Texas Tech, with Adams dropping 17 points and the game-winning shot. Then in the second round versus Duke, Adams would step up, not only scoring a game-high 20 points, but also pulling down a team-high 7 rebounds. The game was close, but the Eagles held the Blue Devils to about 38% shooting. And with a full team effort from Boston College, they were able to complete a second-half comeback and advance to the Sweet 16 to take on Memphis State. Adams would only have 12 points, along with 4 assists and 3 steals. But overall, this was a lower scoring game, and one that looked like it was going to go to overtime, until an Eagles turnover led to an Andre Turner game winner. A tough end to a season which saw Adams average about 15.5 points, 5.5 assists, and 2.5 steals per game. So Adams' college career was over, and while he was incredibly talented, he was an undersized point guard who was still receiving some less than ideal labels.
Michael Adams, he can penetrate. Sometimes he's out of control. When he's not, he's tough.
Again an underdog, Adams didn't have much NBA interest. Yet even if this was the end of his basketball career, he was a college graduate, the first in his family. But then, in the 1985 NBA draft, the Sacramento Kings took a chance on the BC alum in the 3rd round. So Adams had actually done some more to help his draft stock, playing for the Springfield fame of the USBL prior to the NBA draft, and giving himself more exposure. And now he had reached the mountaintop, finally in the NBA, and playing for the Sacramento Kings, where he would stay for 18 games. Right at the deadline for guaranteeing salaries, Adams learned that he had been cut from the team. One of the main reasons, sounding like a broken record at this point, he was just too short, as his brief rookie season ended with averages of about 2 points, 1 assist, and half a steal per game. And maybe that was it for Adams' NBA dream. Taking his mother's advice, he returned home, and then went a couple hours down the road, back to Massachusetts, to join the Bay State Bombardiers of the CBA to play out the rest of the 1986 season, even being named CBA Rookie of the Year after putting up some impressive numbers. And after that, he would make a return to the Springfield fame, again showing that he was not just an exciting player, but a pretty valuable one as well. And when the following NBA season rolled around, Adams had another offer, this time to join the Washington Bullets. His NBA dream had new life. But again, it was over quickly, this time before the season even started, with Adams being waived in late October. But when the Bullets lost guard Frank Johnson to an injury, one man's misfortune became another man's opportunity, and Adams was brought back just a few weeks into the season. This time, Adams actually got some play, logging 33 minutes in his second game with the team, and becoming a regular fixture in the rotation. He wasn't getting a lot of minutes, but he was instant offense off the bench, and averaged an impressive 4 assists in his limited time. And there was one category he led the team in, by a large margin, and that was 3-point attempts. Adams alone attempted 102 in the 87 season. The rest of the Bullets roster attempted 116. They weren't falling often for Adams, but he wasn't going to stop shooting them. The bulk of the Bullets' offense came from big man Moses Malone and swingman Jeff Malone. However, Washington was a team who relied more on their defense, which helped them rack up 42 wins, enough for a playoff berth and a first-round matchup with Detroit. Adams would actually get heavy minutes in this series, dropping 11 points in a Game 1 loss and starting Game 3, while dishing 8 assists. But in the end, Washington was swept by Detroit, and Adams' second chance season had ended with him averaging about 7 points, 4 assists, and 1.5 steals per game. All things considered, this was a huge step forward in Adams' NBA career. 63 games and big minutes in the playoffs should buy him some more time in Washington. But as Adams prepared for his third season, he was given the news that it wouldn't be spent in Washington. Adams was packaged with Jay Vincent to the Denver Nuggets, with many looking at Adams as just a throw-in, joining a Nuggets team who were already set at point guard, with the do-it-all Fat Lever. But this was a Doug Moe Denver Nuggets team, a coach who went all in on offense, and tried to run teams out of the gym. He already had a prolific scorer in Alex English, but a fast-paced offense with high-volume shooting, that was right up Michael Adams' alley. And Doug Moe did something interesting. He made Michael Adams a starter and shifted Lever to the 2. The Nuggets scored at a blistering pace, and few could keep up with Adams as he sliced through defenses in transition. Adams wasn't just getting an opportunity to play his game, he was encouraged, putting up then-career highs across the board. And he didn't just impact the game offensively, as on defense, he and Lever were a nightmare for opponents. Ball handlers had to have their head on a swivel, and no pass was safe. But the offensive side of the ball is where Adams really shined, and it turns out that's why the Nuggets got him, with Moe later saying that to them, he was never a throw-in, he was a target. They wanted him because he was a perfect fit. And then that 3-ball started flying, and Moe couldn't have been happier. Adams shattered last year's mark, leading the NBA in 3-point attempts, while finishing second to Danny Ainge in makes. Last year it wasn't falling all that often, but this year he was making nearly 35% of them, even breaking Danny Ainge's record of 23 straight games with a 3-pointer, and building on that streak for the rest of the season. And on the nights they weren't falling consistently, he still provided a threat which was more than enough to change the way defenses played Denver. Michael Adams may not have been a fit on every NBA team, but he had found his perfect fit in Denver, and the Nuggets were doing exactly what they had planned, overwhelming teams with their offense as they racked up 54 wins, their highest win total since they joined the NBA, getting them a first-round playoff matchup with Seattle. This series got off to a nightmare start for Adams, shooting a combined 5 for 22 from the field over his first 2 games. But Denver had managed to win one of them, so they were in decent shape heading to Seattle. Then Adams picked it up, 19 points and 7 assists in Game 3, then 22 points, 4 assists, and 3 steals in Game 4. But the series remained tied. Game 5 would decide it, and Adams stepped up, dropping 20 points on nearly 54% shooting while draining 4 threes. The Nuggets won in a blowout, and were heading to the second round to take on Dallas. Adams wouldn't find the same success in round 2. He would hit double figures in 3 games, and average 7 assists for the series, but he was putting up many shots, yet making few of them, shooting about 33% from the field and 27% from deep. The Nuggets got out to a 2-1 lead, but couldn't win again after that. Dallas wrapped it up in 6 to end their season. and Adams finished the year with averages of about 14 points, 6 assists, and 2 steals per game. It was still unsure what Michael Adams' ceiling was, but one thing he had confirmed with his first season in Denver is that he was an NBA caliber player, and now on a team who wanted him, his opportunities would only grow. Denver rolled out a similar lineup for the '89 season, and now featured one of the highest scoring trios in the league. English was still the top dog, but Adams' production had again skyrocketed, finishing as the team's third leading scorer, while also finishing second to Lever in both assists and steals. Adams was looking like an NBA star some nights, something that very few had seen coming.
If you were to ask me who in the NBA is the most surprising player from college and what he's been able to accomplish, Michael Adams might be the answer.
It was the usual story for Adams, using his extremely unconventional push shot to hoist up three-pointers at historic rates.
Adams for 3, and he shoots more three-pointers than anybody in the NBA.
Probably the ugliest shot of anybody in the NBA, but boy, it goes in.
Once again leading the league in attempts, but this year he would also lead the league in makes and extend his three-point streak to 79 games. Then when the defense did tighten up, he was past them in the blink of an eye.
One of the things he does to you, you step up on him to take away the three-pointer, and he has too much quickness for any player to play that close, and he gets by you on the drive.
And when he got to the free throw line, it was as good as a guaranteed 2 points.
And this is the guy that has missed only one free throw this year.
Adams was a multi-dimensional scorer and a three-point bomber like the league had never seen, earning the permanent green light from Doug Moe and earning himself a spot in the three-point shootout.
This man wrote his name in the NBA record book by sinking at least one three-point field goal in 79 straight games. He leads the NBA in three-pointers made and attempted and is on a record-setting pace in both categories.
And the Nuggets kept up as one of the most potent offenses in the NBA, but their already poor defense had gotten worse in '89, leading to a lot more shootouts which didn't go in their favor. They still made the playoffs, but they won 10 less games than last year. The Nuggets got the Suns in round 1. Adams sat out game 1 with hamstring injuries, but played great the rest of the way, recording 25 points and 12 boards in game 2, and then 22 and 3 steals in game 3. Yet all of these games ended in Denver losses, and they were swept out of the playoffs. Adams' season ending with him averaging about 18.5 points, 6.5 assists, and 2 steals per game. The 1990 season would kick off the end of an era in Denver. English was 36 years old and would fail to average at least 20 points for the first time in a decade. And as English slowed down, defenses could put more focus on Adams, as he would see his numbers decline from last year and only shoot about 40%. But that three ball was still very prominent, with Adams again leading the league in makes and attempts on nearly 37% from deep. And he was ready for a more lucrative contract, but Denver told him he'd have to wait, and that wasn't what he wanted to hear. His numbers had dipped, but he was still very dangerous, with 4 30-point games and 11 double-doubles. But the wins weren't coming. This was a Nuggets team who had such a heavy reliance on outrunning and outscoring every opponent they played that they couldn't really afford the decline in English's production. They were still one of the league's highest scoring teams, but it was on their lowest scoring average in a decade, with their defense remaining near the bottom of the league. They started the year strong, but faltered down the stretch, finishing the season at 43-39, which again was still enough for a playoff berth and a matchup with the San Antonio Spurs. The Spurs defense proved a tough challenge, and while Adams averaged a solid 13 points and 6 assists, he put up a lot of shots that just wouldn't fall, and San Antonio beat Denver at their own game, running up the score every night as Denver had another season end with a sweep. And Adams' year had seen him average about 15.5 points, 6.5 assists, and 1.5 steals per game. Adams got his wish in the offseason, finally able to say that he made it in the NBA after signing a 5-year multi-million-dollar extension with the Nuggets. And Denver was putting a lot of faith in Adams. They had let English walk and traded Lever to the Mavericks. They did make one major addition with the acquisition of athletic forward Orlando Woolridge, and would bring in LSU point guard Chris Jackson through the draft, but Adams was set to be option number 1 on a Nuggets team who also had a new coach in Paul Westhead, who had just spent the past 5 years as the head coach at Loyola Marymount, the man behind a historically high-scoring offense, and thus began one of the most fascinating seasons of any team in NBA history. Westhead had a lot of success with his run-and-gun style in the NCAA, and it wasn't really a shift from how Denver had been playing under Mo, so maybe it would work in the NBA. The Nuggets were unsurprisingly the league's highest scoring team in '91, at nearly 120 points per game, kicking off the season by scoring 158 points against the Golden State Warriors, yet somehow still losing, which was the major flaw in Denver's game plan. They were going to get their points, no question. There were few defenses who could keep up with Denver for 48 minutes, but at least their opponents played defense, something the Nuggets did not do. Known as the Denver Nuggets, due to their lack of D, the Nuggets allowed a league-worst 131 points per game. They were more likely to allow 150 points than they were to hold a team below 110 points. And in just their 6th game of the season, they allowed the Phoenix Suns to score 107 points in the first half, overall giving up a season-high 173 points. So in a nutshell, the Nuggets' strategy was to score as many points as humanly possible and hope for the best. And while not trying to take anything away from Michael Adams, it's important context in understanding his '91 season. Adams was a scoring machine this year, leading the Nuggets as he and Woolridge formed a high-scoring duo, with Adams even finishing as a top 10 scorer in the league. Adams pushed the pace from the opening tip to the final buzzer, beating defenders down the floor for a finish at the rim or a pull-up jumper. And with guys like Woolridge running the floor with him, and some solid shooters to get the ball to in the half-court, Adams also averaged over 10 assists, to finish top 3 in the NBA in that category. But we're talking Michael Adams, so we can't forget three-pointers. The Nuggets as a whole led the league with 1,059 attempts. Adams was responsible for more than half of those, as his 564 attempts were more than the total attempts of 14 NBA teams this season. Yet even with all those attempts, he only made the second most in the NBA, beating his career high by just a single make, and shooting below 30% from deep. It wasn't about the best shots in Denver, it was about the most shots, but it was still a product of the game plan, and that didn't mean that Adams couldn't completely torch your favorite team, dropping at least 30 points on 23 separate occasions, which included a career-high 54 in a late-season loss to the Bucks. And with 37 double-doubles and 1 triple-double, he could hurt you with more than just scoring. And Denver wanted to get out in transition, so Adams could gamble on defense, tying his career high with 2.2 steals per game. Statistically, Adams had all-star level numbers, yet wouldn't be an all-star, due to inefficiency and because you have to account for team success. And as it turned out, all offense and no defense was no recipe for success. And it didn't help that Woolridge missed 2 months mid-season, and Adams missed 16 games of his own. All in all, Nuggets basketball was an exciting show, but one that produced little results, as the team finished dead last with just 20 wins. And Adams' prolific season ended with averages of about 26.5 points, 10.5 assists, and 2 steals per game. There were some more contract issues for Adams after the season. He wanted a pay raise after the way he played, and while this may seem greedy after just getting an extension, this issue came about due to the contract the Nuggets had given rookie Chris Jackson. Adams was the starter and focal point of the team, yet he was making half the amount of a rookie backup. The Nuggets weren't willing to renegotiate, and with the season they had, they were already planning a rebuild, so an unhappy Adams was sent back to Washington in early June. Adams didn't end up with a new deal or in a much better situation, but a Washington Bullets team who had lost their top scorer in Bernard King needed to try and make up for some of that lost production. So Adams joined the team and formed a solid trio with forward Harvey Grant and center Purvis Ellison. The Bullets didn't play at the same breakneck pace, but even in a new system, Adams started the season on a tear, dropping 40 on the Celtics in the second game of the year, and after 12 games he was averaging about 28 points and 9 assists, among the league leaders in both categories. But after sustaining wrist and finger injuries in late November, his numbers and his efficiency suffered.
In his last 4 games from the field. Adams. Michael Adams has had a tough year from the field, John. He's not shot well for the Bullets, at about 38%. Takes a lot of shots, too.
Yet this was understandable. Adams was injured, and he could have taken some time off to recover. But if Michael Adams was healthy enough to play, he was going to play. No excuses. So overall, Adams wouldn't put up the numbers he had last year, but he was still a great scorer and distributor, while even averaging a career-high 4 rebounds. His efficiency was again quite low, but the wrist injury to his shooting hand definitely contributed to that. And after some thought he deserved an All-Star selection last year, he would get it this year as an injury replacement. The once too small NBA castoff was now suiting up alongside the best in the league. As for the Bullets, they started slow and only got worse. They were better than last year's Nuggets, but with only 25 wins, not much better. As Adams ended his return season in Washington with averages of about 18 points, 7.5 assists, and 2 steals per game. Adams continued as the starter in '93. Ellison would miss extended time, but Washington had added rookie forward Tom Gugliotta, who would help pick up some of the slack. And while Adams was still one of the top scorers on the team, his scoring had dropped as he took less shots, in turn leading to one of the most efficient seasons of his career. Adams acted as less of a score-first guard and played a bit more like a traditional point guard, facilitating the offense and looking to get his teammates involved first, yet still taking the shots when they were there. With his most memorable shot coming in the first quarter of a December 1st game versus San Antonio, when Adams hit his 795th career three-pointer, passing Louis Dampier for the most all-time across the ABA and NBA, a record Adams held briefly, but held nonetheless. So while the days of raining down threes and dropping 40-plus points were mostly gone, Adams was addressing one of the other criticisms that followed him throughout his career. He was playing a more controlled game, but Washington's offense already was nothing special. And with Ellison missing nearly half the season, they dropped to one of the worst in the league, and their defense was no better. It was only getting worse in Washington, as this year they would only manage 22 wins, the third lowest total in the league, as Adams finished the year with averages of about 15 points, 7.5 assists, and 1.5 steals per game. The '94 season saw further decline in Adams' numbers. Grant had been traded, and Ellison continued to struggle with injury. As his time in Washington progressed, Adams saw his role diminish. Still the starter, his scoring was his lowest since his first stint in Washington, but as his assists remained the same, he still had plenty of value as a facilitator, in an offense that had actually shown some improvement. But overall, Washington was going nowhere fast. Adams was solid, but at 31 years old, he wasn't the long-term answer. And after another season below 30 wins, it was obvious the Bullets would be making some changes soon, as Adams wrapped up another year in Washington with averages of about 12 points, 7 assists, and 1.5 steals per game. After 3 years in Washington, Adams again had a new home, traded to the Charlotte Hornets in early August. Charlotte already had their starting point guard in Muggsy Bogues, but Adams was a great backup for how they like to play. Another small guard who went a mile a minute. Unfortunately for Adams, after spending his first 9 seasons without any serious injury issues, his body started breaking down in year 10, only managing 4 games before he was sidelined for more than 2 months, then missing another month late in the year, overall appearing in just 29 games, and putting up some of the lowest numbers of his career. Yet he would make a return to the playoffs, as the Hornets won 50 games and got a first-round matchup with Chicago. However, injury limited Adams to just 1 game of what ended up being a 4-game series loss for the Hornets, as Adams' first year in Charlotte saw him average about 6.5 points, 1.5 assists, and a steal per game. Adams was hoping for a redemption year in '96, but it would be the complete opposite. Just like last year, after playing 4 early season games, injuries would sideline him until January, missing extended time again late in the season. He wanted to prove himself, but he could only manage 21 games, and the Hornets could only manage 41 wins. Not enough for a playoff berth, as Adams' year ended with him averaging about 5.5 points, 3 assists, and a steal per game. So the Adams acquisition hadn't gone as planned, and with the Hornets moving in a different direction, they would release the guard in July, unexpectedly marking the end of his NBA career. Maybe not an ideal end, but also nothing to hang his head over. Adams had defied the odds and left the game as an all-star, and he didn't leave the game for good, soon returning to an NBA bench as an assistant coach, and even spending a season as the head coach of the WNBA's Washington Mystics. Michael Adams' journey to the NBA wasn't easy, but he never gave up. With every opportunity he was given, he made the most of it and proved himself. Whether it was his incredible career at Boston College, his prolific offensive seasons in Denver, or his ability to adapt to a new system in Washington, Adams showed that he wasn't some novelty player. He was a legit NBA talent. And when you look at the three-point shooting league that the NBA has become, you realize that for as crazy as Michael Adams seemed at the time, He was really a glimpse into the future, a player who had more confidence than anyone else on the court, and rode that confidence to an NBA career spanning over a decade. If Michael Adams plays in a different era, he may be looked at in a whole different light. But regardless of era, if you're averaging a double-double and setting NBA records, you deserve recognition. But that's it for today's episode on Michael Adams. Hope you enjoyed it, and make sure to subscribe for more videos like this one. If you liked it, check out this one on another Boston College alum, or this one on one of his Washington Bullets teammates. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.